Well, good morning on this frigid January day. Oh my gosh. Did Cincinnati get a winter this year or what? I was hoping for one more warm Cincinnati winter, which just means we'll have more folks watching on YouTube today. Hi, YouTube folks. Welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Cincinnati. I am Dr. Alexander Riegel, the developmental minister here at First U. First Unitarian Church is a place where you are free to be you, and let that sink in. Here, you are free to be you, no matter your race, your sexual orientation, your gender identity, your socioeconomic status, your age, or whatever other triviality we like to use to keep us separate from others. None of those matter here. So, bring your questioning mind, bring your expansive heart, bring your entire self to this beloved community. Our mission at First Church is to welcome all with love, to support learning and spiritual growth, to serve our wider community, and to work for justice, equity, and inclusion. If you're visiting with us today, we especially welcome you. Please feel free to join us for coffee hour following the service. If you don't know where that's at, it's just a little bit to the left of where you came in the church entry doors. We call it Ellen Hall, but you'll probably recognize it by the waft of coffee coming from that space. We'd love to have a chance to get to know you and tell you a little bit more about our beloved community. And our flowers today are from Mary Mark and are dedicated to all the January birthdays. So thank you for honoring our birthdays, Mary Mark. And please note that the church office is going to be closed tomorrow in honor of Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. And we'll reopen on Tuesday. And I'd like to invite Dan Schneider forward to do a brief announcement as well.
Good morning. If you're like me, you'll probably notice there are a lot of strange things happening in this country right now. And we are getting a group together after church to talk about it. We have a name for it. Somebody asked me, what are you going to name it? I said, you can help decide the name. We're just going to talk today. It's called a discernment process. The name we have right now is Spiritual Wholeness Through Community Action. Spiritual wholeness comes from the 8th principle, which you know about. Talks about beloved community with a multiracial look to it, multiracial, multicultural, beloved community. That's one of the things we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about our own experiences and our own concerns about our democracy and where our nation is going. We're going to talk about the action of immediate witness that UUA did last June that we all voted for, those of us who were delegates, which talks about defending our democracy. And we're going to talk about UU values with love at the center and what you have to bring to the table. So please join us. The meeting will take place on the 2nd floor. If you go up to the elevator or the steps go up and go all the way back, room 207. Hope to see you there right after church. Thank you.
So before we continue with our service, here we go. Let's take a moment and wave to the people watching from home on YouTube. Hello, people watching from home on YouTube. And then rise and greet our neighbors, or if you're on YouTube, say hello in the chat. And when you hear the sound of the singing bowl, return to your seats. Ding, 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 ding. If you don't return to your seats in the next 15 seconds, coffee hour will be canceled. Is that a motivator? All right, thank you all. Meredith, are you here this morning to light our chalice? Come on up. I don't know which one of these gizmos is actually going to function, but I'll let you figure that out while I read the chalice lighting words. So today is a service on the Dhammapada, which is the Buddha's teaching for the average layperson. And the story of the Buddha is, at the time of his death, when people were gathered around to say farewell to the Buddha, they said, "Buddha, please don't leave us, we need you." And the Buddha's response is reported to have been this: "Be a refuge unto yourselves. Be a lamp unto yourselves. Rely on yourselves and nothing else. You do not need me." Thank you, Meredith. All right. Our first hymn this morning is number 16 in the gray hymnal. "'Tis a gift to be simple." The words should also appear on the screen behind the pulpit. Please be seated. So our meditation this morning comes from the Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh. Most people are at least familiar with the name. He, in his later years, developed a sangha, a religious community in France called Plum Village. And he is an excellent, excellent teacher. I should say, he was an excellent teacher. He passed from us a few years ago. He once wrote a poem, and the poem is on the Buddhist theme of interbeing. And interbeing basically means we are all one. We are all connected. There is no such separation between us. All perceptions of separation are delusions of the mind. So there's nothing that takes place that is not connected to each and every one of us. And so he writes, "Do not say that I'll depart tomorrow, because even today I still arrive. Look deeply. I arrive in every second to be a bud on a spring branch, to be a tiny bird with wings still fragile, learning to sing in my new nest, to be a caterpillar in the heart of a flower, to be a jewel hiding itself in a stone. I still arrive in order to laugh and to cry, in order to fear and to hope. The rhythm of my heart is the birth and death of all that are alive. I am the mayfly metamorphosizing on the surface of the river. And I am the bird which, when spring comes, arrives in time to eat the mayfly. I am the frog swimming happily in the clear pond. And I am the grass snake who, approaching in silence, feeds itself on the frog. I am the child in Uganda, all skin and bones, my legs as thin as bamboo sticks. And I am the arms merchant selling deadly weapons to Uganda. I am the 12-year-old girl, refugee on a small boat, who throws herself into the ocean after being raped by a sea pirate. And I am the pirate, my heart not yet capable of seeing and loving. I am a member of the Politburo, with plenty of power in my hands. And I am the man who has to pay his debt of blood to my people, dying slowly in a forced labor camp. My joy is like spring, so warm it makes flowers bloom in all walks of life. My pain is like a river of tears, so full it fills the four oceans. Please call me by my true names, so I can hear all my cries and laughs at once, so I can see that my joy and my pain are one. Please call me by my true names so I can wake up and so the door of my heart can be left open, the door of compassion. So Noriko, thank you. That was beautiful. And thank you for stepping in this morning. It was very wonderful of you to sub. So as I mentioned, the Dhammapada is the theme of today's service. And the Dhammapada is said to be the Buddha's teaching for the average layperson, which means that it is one of the more accessible Buddhist texts. And I'm going to read probably 8 or 10 snippets from the Dhammapada and talk just a little bit about them in just a bit. But I'd like this to be a little bit more contemplative, so I'm going to slow roll through that part of the sermon and maybe even slow roll enough for you to have some moments of extended silence to contemplate some of the Buddha's wisdom. But before there, I thought it would be a good idea to give a little background to the Buddha. And I like to do this because a lot of people don't realize just how firmly rooted in Hinduism Buddhism is. Buddhism is actually an offshoot of Hinduism, and a lot of people don't know that. A lot of people don't know that the Buddha was actually an Indian prince who lived in North India. And his father had a palace and territory as far as the eye could see, and all the wealth a human being could ever need. And so the Buddha was raised as a prince, destined to be a king, in incredible lavishness and security. But as he grew older, most say around his early adulthood or late teen years, he became curious of what lay beyond his father's kingdom. And so he told one of his caretakers, I want you to get a horse and a carriage, and I want you to take me far beyond my father's kingdom so I can see the rest of the world. And so that's what happened. And when the Buddha's travels extended beyond his father's kingdom, he began to see for the first time in his life how most people in India at the time lived. And most people in India at the time lived in squalor and had to struggle sun up to sundown just to provide their own sustenance to live. And it is said that one day on these travels, they came across a person in the streets who was very ill. Well, the Buddha was raised in such lavishness and security that he had never even seen an ill person before. And so he said to his caretaker, what is wrong with that person? And the caretaker said, well, Siddhartha, the Buddha's name before he was the Buddha was Siddhartha, that person's ill, he's sick. And the Buddha said, what is sick? And so the caretaker explained sickness to the Buddha. And they traveled further, and before too long, they saw a very elderly person hobbling along in the streets on a cane. And the Buddha said, that person looks strange. What's going on with that person? And the caretaker said, well, Siddhartha, that person is getting old. And eventually that person's going to die. And the Buddha was confused. He didn't understand these concepts. And they went further, and eventually they came upon a cremation ceremony. And the Buddha said, why are they burning this person? And the caretaker said, well, this person is one who's died, and we have to dispose of the body, and this is how we dispose of the bodies. And so, as the story goes, whether it's apocryphal or true, the Buddha on his travels beyond his father's kingdom actually came to understand the facts of human existence. We're born, we get sick, we get feeble, we die, and bodies have to be disposed of. And this troubled the Buddha a great deal. And so the Buddha decided he was going to attempt to solve this problem of human suffering. And something people don't realize, because Buddhism is probably the most philosophical system of all the world's religions, people don't realize the Buddha didn't set out to be a philosopher. He didn't really set out to become enlightened. He set out to solve the problem of human suffering. And he was so motivated to do this that one night in the middle of the night, he fled his father's kingdom, mounted horseback, charged through the gates, and went out to live a life of asceticism until he could solve the problem of human suffering. An interesting footnote here, which you don't hear many people share when they talk about the Buddha's story. The Buddha was actually married at the time. How many people know the Buddha had a wife at one point? Some of you know. Not many. How many people know that the Buddha had a 2-year-old son when he fled the gates? A few of you know. Do you know the son's name? If you happen to know it, shout it really loud. Rahula. The son's name was Rahula, which means fetter or ball and chain. And so I've always found it curious that when you hear the story of the Buddha, this is conveniently left out of this story. And it chagrins me a little bit from an ethical point of view. But as one Buddhist person I know said, well, we wouldn't have Buddhism if this didn't happen. And this gets to that whole story I've talked so much about narrative. Well, okay, from your point of view, that's a compelling narrative, but from the point of view of the young wife with the 2-year-old son, I don't know, not so much maybe. But that's just a footnote. We don't need to detract any further from the story of the Buddha. So, the Buddha was not a philosophical figure. The Buddha was a figure who sought to cure the problem of human suffering. In fact, there was only one doctrine the Buddha came up with that has any significant departure from Hinduism. Remember, he was born and raised in northern India. Hinduism was well established in India at the time. And so his experience, his education was Indian/Hindu. And so many of the philosophical ideas he had, he didn't create, he just carried them from Hinduism into his Buddhism. But there's one significant difference. In Hinduism, the Hindus believe in the Atman. So the Atman basically is your soul. And your soul is derived from Brahman, who is God. So the Hindus believe that our soul is basically a spark of the divine. Or I like to say a fractal of the divine, because the soul carries all those wonderful divine virtues within it. And the Atman, which is Brahman, recurs over and over again through eons of time. It can never be destroyed. And the Buddha said, no Atman, an-Atman, an-Atman, the denial of Atman. There is no soul or self that persists beyond your life. Which raises a very interesting paradox in Buddhism, because, and I've never been able to wrap my mind around this, and believe me, I've tried. But there are Buddhists who say it's not a paradox. Nevertheless, reincarnation is real in Buddhism. So this poses the question, well, if there's no soul, what's reincarnating? So if you want to go down a deep rabbit hole, you can do that one on your own after service today. My point is that's the only philosophical doctrine, really, of significance that the Buddha came up with. And he came up with it based on his experience of enlightenment. It's just how he saw the nature of his self. But other than that, most of the Buddha's teachings are Hindu. But he really had set out to solve the problem of human suffering. And as he gained a following in India, because India was a very philosophical place, people would come to the Buddha looking for philosophical answers to life's problems. They wanted to know the solution to life rather than experience the solution to life's problems. And one story is about a gentleman named Malankyaputra who came to study with the Buddha. And over time, he realized the Buddha doesn't really wax very philosophical. I'm not getting any answers to the philosophical questions I brought to the Buddha. So when his frustration finally got the best of him, he went to the Buddha and he said, "Blessed One, there are theories which you have not addressed. Whether the world is eternal or not, whether the soul and the body are the same or different, whether a person who has attained nirvana continues to exist after death. Your failure to settle these questions does not please me. If you will not settle these questions, I will give up spiritual disciplines and return to the life of a layman." And the Buddha lost me. There we go. Oh, we're doing that one again. I think if I just look this way. I love you all over there, but I don't think I can look at you. The Buddha replied to Malankyaputra, "When you joined the Sangha, did I promise you I would answer such questions?" And Malankyaputra said, "No, Blessed One, you did not make such a promise." And the Buddha said, "Well, why do you think that is?" And Malankyaputra says, "I have no idea, because these are the important questions." So what follows is one of the favorite Buddhist teachings that many people espouse. The Buddha said, "Suppose, Malankyaputra, that a man has been wounded by a poisoned arrow, and his friends and family are about to call a doctor. 'Wait,' says the man. 'I will not let this arrow be removed until I have learned the caste of the man who shot me. I also demand to know from what family he comes, from what kind of wood his bow is made, and what Fletcher made his arrow. When I know these things, you can proceed to take the arrow out and administer the antidote.' Malankyaputra, what would you think of this man?" Malankyaputra said, "Oh, Blessed One, he would be a fool. His questions have nothing to do with removing the arrow, and he would die before they were answered." Similarly, Malankyaputra, I do not teach whether the world is eternal or not, whether the soul and the body are the same or different, whether a person who has attained nirvana continues to exist after death. I teach how to remove the arrow, the fact of suffering, the cause of suffering, the end of suffering, and the Eightfold Noble Path, which is the means by which suffering is brought to an end. So that gives you a sense of the Buddha's true agenda. Not terribly philosophical, even though over the centuries, Buddhism has become a very philosophical tradition. What the Buddha really spent his time doing is teaching about the nature of suffering and how to overcome it. And the way you overcome the nature of suffering is by managing your own self. And so he talks about the different aspects of the self that need to be managed in order to overcome suffering. So a lot of what's going on in the Dhammapada are very accessible teachings about different themes. And I'm going to touch upon probably 3 of those themes now. And so I'll read them. I'll read 2 excerpts from each theme, and we'll pause for a minute. And then I'll just say a little bit about what's going on in this particular theme with the Buddha. So concerning the mind, the Buddha says, as rain seeps through a poorly thatched roof, evil thoughts seep into the untrained mind. As rain cannot seep through a well-thatched roof, evil thoughts cannot seep into a well-trained mind. More than those who hate you, more than all your enemies, an undisciplined mind does greater harm. More than your mother, more than your father, more than all your family, a well-disciplined mind does greater good. So what is the Buddha trying to tell us in this teaching about the mind? To the Buddha, it was very important to manage the mind. Well, a mind that is not well managed is a mind that is susceptible and generally succumbs to destructive thinking. Thoughts that are rooted in the vices. So it's important to train our minds, but what does it mean to train your mind? It means the ability to direct your thinking to those teachings, those objects, those practices that support the spiritual agenda, and not let the mind drift into negative thinking patterns that tend to cause you, if you were in the service a couple of weeks ago, to contract into an egoic state that is less receptive to the possibility of spiritual experience. So how do you do that? How do you manage the mind? I mean, if you sit in silence for 2 minutes and you're a good self-observer, in 2 minutes, it's going to be really obvious to you, you do not control your mind. I mean, isn't that frightening? The mind wanders everywhere. You know, I've said this before, but it's been a while. The mind tends to wander toward those things that our particular ego structure is interested in. And so we're okay with its wandering because it serves our ego. And because we're okay with its wandering in service of our ego, we feel we're choosing those things to which our mind attends. But to accept the wandering mind after it has wandered is not to manage it. it's to justify it. And the Buddha is saying that's not the way the mind should be managed. The mind needs to be directed at your will toward what you choose. So when you catch your mind wandering into negative thinking, which will stir up all those egoic vices we don't want to live from, you need to manage it. And you manage it very simply by catching the fact that my mind is doing this and giving your mind a different object of attention to which to attend. In other words, change your thinking. If you're upset by a scoundrel in your life and you're having negative thoughts about this person and it's engendering anger or bitterness or resentment, and you can catch yourself doing this, what you need to do is be aware you're doing it and then change your thinking to something positive. The virtues, the beauty of nature, kind act that you could commit even toward this scoundrel who's frustrating you. In the Athos tradition, you've heard me speak before of the Mount Athos, which is a peninsula in Greece. These are the Eastern Christian Orthodox monks that hold the wisdom of the desert traditions. They talk about guarding your thoughts. And guarding your thoughts is this very thing. Becoming aware when your thoughts have wandered to a negative place and shifting them to a positive place. So it's very important to manage the mind. It's also very important to manage. Does it my head or is it? All right, we did this before. It works. We'll do it again. Except now I feel like I'm 3 times further away from you all. How we doing? Testing 1, 2, 3. How's that? Can you hear me? All right. I miss you. Oh, thank you. So the Buddha also said it is important to manage your desire. And he wrote this, or said this, and it was later written down. Wherever the 36 streams flow from the mind toward pleasure, the currents will sweep that unfortunate person away. Like a spider caught in its own web is a person driven by fierce cravings. I don't know, I think that one needs to be somewhere in this 12-step program. I mean, that's the nature of addiction. Like a spider caught in its own web is a person driven by fierce cravings. So this reminds me of a saying attributed to Jesus. Jesus said, "You cannot serve both God and mammon." You cannot serve both God and wealth and material goods. For you will love the one and hate the other. Which is a way of saying every moment you have a choice. Either to be caught in the world and live according to the world and indulge in things of the world, or you can choose to free yourself of that engagement. And in freeing yourself of that engagement, you find yourself on the first step toward what the Buddha called nirvana. Do y'all know what nirvana really is? Nirvana basically means to blow out. And so when the Buddha talks about nirvana, he's basically saying you have reached an inner state where all of the fires that burn within you, the negative mind, the desires, etc., have been blown out. They no longer compel you, and you stand free within your own self. And that standing free within your own self is when you finally realize your true nature, your Buddha nature. That is nirvana. It's not nearly as magical and metaphysical as it sounds. It's hard to do, but the experience is knowable. But to do it, you must manage desire, because you can't be caught in desire and be free within yourself. That's what Jesus meant when he said, one cannot serve both God and mammon. Choose your Lord. Attachment to pleasure is the most serious obstacle to spiritual growth. Aspirants can lose themselves in pleasure and abandon their quest for life's supreme purpose. Katha Upanishads. In the Katha Upanishad, there's a story about Yama, the king of death, and Nachiketa, who is his student. In the Upanishads, the king of death is a very, very wise teacher, perhaps the wisest. And in teaching Nachiketa, the king of death says, "The joy of the spirit ever abides." That essential nature that you are is innately joyful. The joy of the spirit ever abides, but not what seems pleasant to the senses. In other words, the pursuit of instinctual desire is the pursuit of one transient pleasure after another, because the desires that we pursue and the pleasures they bring are very limited in duration. And they will cause endless pursuit, one after the other. Both these, differing in their purpose, prompt us to action. All is well for those who choose the joy of the spirit, but for those who prefer the pleasant, they miss the goal of life. Perennial joy or passing pleasure, this is the choice one is always to make. The wise recognize this, but not the ignorant. So even the Buddha's insight into the nature of suffering predates him in the Upanishads, which is part of the Indian tradition in which he was steeped. So let's take a little time and look at ethics. One of the things I've noticed here in America is very, very, very few spiritual teachers talk about ethics. Because I believe you don't sell many books telling people to abandon their instinctual nature. Instinctual gratification is the source of most unethical behavior. And you're not going to sell many books telling people to stop that, which is unfortunate, because the reality is if you don't stop that, you're not going to make your progress on your spiritual journey. The Buddha talks about this a lot. Your ethics matter. Now, I talk about this when I have spiritual direction clients and we get into this particular topic. I tell them, what happens to you when you sit on your cushion to meditate? Well, you start replaying your day, or your days, or your week, or your weeks, or your months, or your years, or your life. And those tapes play in your head constantly when you're trying to do your spiritual work. It's a given. It's the nature of the beast. It's what happens in the beginning phases of meditation. You will be confronted with yourself. And do you really want to be confronted with your unethical nature? Probably not. It's not a comfortable experience. it makes doing your spiritual practice, it makes sitting on your cushion much more difficult. So act ethically to support your practice. The Buddha said, "Let no one think lightly of evil and say to himself, 'Sorrow will not come to me.' Little by little, a person becomes evil, as a pot is filled by drops of water." Every action matters, from the smallest to the greatest. Be ethical, is what he's saying. Not in the sky, not in the ocean, not in the mountain canyons is there a place anywhere. Is there a place anywhere in the world where a person can hide from his evil deeds? You carry the story of you within you. Was it John Kabat-Zinn back in the 80s or so, who was pretty popular for saying, "Wherever you go, there you are." So keep the psyche clean by acting ethical. Very simple message, very important message, very unpopular message. Typically in the East, when you talk about ethics, the topic of karma comes up. And karma basically means how you act in the world will come back to you. You act good in the world, good will come back to you. You act evil in the world, evil will come back to you. I notice that's largely true, but not always. There are people who are good in the world and good doesn't come back to them. And there are people who are evil in the world. Don't moan and don't go there. Evil doesn't come back to them. You know what I'm talking about. But karma also acts internally with us. And I think internally it is 100% spot on. When we act unethically in the world, we pay some form of psychological price, because we know we've been a scoundrel. And you can't unring those bells. It just makes the workload heavier. So be good, says the Buddha. So there you have some of the Buddha's teachings on the mind and desire, or the instincts and ethics. And that's just the tip of the Dhammapada iceberg. It is one I would recommend if you're at all interested in the spiritual journey and you want a good guidebook that isn't going to force you to wax philosophical and work too hard to understand the teaching. The Dhammapada is a golden guidebook. Let's just do a couple more before we end here, because I like to sometimes talk about, as you've probably already noticed, the interspiritual connections between these great teachings. I've been alive long enough and been doing this long enough that when I read something from the Dhammapada, I'll think of something from the monks on Mount Athos, as you've noticed, or the Upanishads, or the Sufis. And I like to see the way these all blend together, because in the end, if you strip these great traditions of their cultural baggage, the spiritual teachings are essentially the same. And that's a wonderful thing to understand. The Buddha said, "Those who recite many scriptures but do not practice their teachings are like a cowherd counting another's cows." I like that one. Those who recite many scriptures but do not practice their teachings are like a cowherd counting another's cows. They do not share in the joys of the spiritual life. All right, I'm going to push you all a bit. Those who recite many scriptures but do not practice their teachings are like a cowherd counting another's cows. Boy, do we love mentally to absorb the wonders of all these different world religions and philosophies as Unitarian Universalists. We love the breadth of our living tradition. But how sincerely do we practice those teachings? Some do, to greater or lesser degrees. But how many of us truly mind those traditions, absorb those teachings, and actually practice them on a daily basis? I'd encourage you to consider picking one of these paths and sticking with it for a while. Don't be a cowherd counting other people's cows. Does it remind you of anything else I've said in the not too distant future? Maybe a Sufi saying? A donkey carrying a load of holy books is still a donkey. Right? There's your interspiritual spin on that one. Let's do this one. Use your body for doing good, not for harm. Train it to follow the Dharma, which is basically the eternal law of ethics. Use your tongue for doing good, not for harm. Train it to speak kindly. Use your mind for doing good, not for harm. Train your mind in love. Any chance that reminds any of you of anything? It was a while ago, but I did a 3-part sermon series on this, basically. Remember my sermon on ahimsa? Nonviolence in word, thought, and deed? That's what the Buddha's talking about here. Yeah, if you don't remember it, it's on YouTube. I think it's worth an hour and a half on a Sunday afternoon. All right, we're going to leave it there. Let's do our last hymn if we could. This is number 34 in the gray hymnal. Though I may speak with bravest fire, and the words are appearing behind me on the screen as I speak. All right, please be seated. So go home, log on, spend $8 for the Dhammapada, and keep it by your bedside. Everybody needs something to fall asleep to. And if you fall asleep to 10 minutes of perusing the Dhammapada every day, It'll start sinking in, and you'll see the wisdom of the path. Meredith, are you still on our sanctuary? Could you come up and extinguish our chalice for us? Thank you. One more from the Dhammapada to close our service. As irrigation guides water to their fields, as archers aim arrows, as carpenters carve wood, the wise shape their lives. Blessed be.